Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Zoom into Books presentation. Today, we are talking with Headline Books author, award-winning Headline Books author, Don Helin, and he's going to be discussing his top-notch political thriller, Missing. So if you all have questions for Don, feel free to type them into the chat. And if you'd like to buy any copies of the books discussed today, there are also links underneath this video to the books. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Don Helin. Thanks so much for joining us today, Don.
Well, thank you very much, Ashley. It is great to be here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion of Missing. Missing's been out about a couple months now, and a lot of people are telling me they enjoy it, but also I have a number of writers friends, as well as my readers, who say, well, now, you have so many plot lines in there. How in the world do you do that? You know, and I thought today might be a good opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about plot lines and how we put them together. And also that might help folks who haven't had a chance to read Missing to get it and take a look at it. Normally, I usually use a couple of plot lines because for thriller writers, what you want to do is get your hero going down someplace and people know there's going to be a problem, and it's just as this problem's about to hit, you flip and people say, what happened? Well, in Missing, we tried to put together 4 plot lines. And so what I wanted to do is just talk a little bit about how we did that. And then I'd like to read just a few excerpts from Missing to kind of tell you how we tried to do it. Now, I'll have to tell you, Missing is my 7th thriller. And I'll have to tell you, it always comes down to getting started with a book. And how am I going to do that? And what's the best way to try to do it? Because the beginning of the novel is so important. First of all, your reader needs to know who the main character is. And you have to introduce the situation. So every writer has to ask themselves, have you given your reader a character who's worth following, created problems for that character in the beginning, and established the stakes? What are the stakes? It has to be something that's big and hard. I try to give each of my novels high stakes. For example, in my second novel, Secret Assault, Sons of My Lai, I thought about that. I was in Vietnam, and I thought, what would happen if the sons of and daughters of the people who were killed at My Lai that awful day came to the United States and started taking revenge? And all of a sudden, Zach Kelly, who's my hero, realizes that people are dying. Senior officers are dying. So that was the stakes. That was what was at stake in Secret Assault. So now I've got to do the same thing for my other novels. And you know, I'm sure most of you have gone back to a high school reunion, you know, and maybe it's been a while since you've seen the friends that were so close to you and you graduated with. For me, because I was in the Army, it was 25 years before I went back. And I still remember sitting in that hotel wondering what they would look like, what they were like, what they were doing, stuff like that. And so there's a lot of stress in a high school reunion. And I thought, maybe it's time for Zach. He's in his late 30s, so maybe it's time for Zach to go back to his 20th high school reunion. He has not been to Minneapolis, where he grew up, for a high school reunion for 20 years. And I thought, maybe we ought to try that. And as a thriller writer, I'm always thinking, what if? Okay, things are going wrong, but what if something happens to throw that reunion into absolute turmoil? Okay, but what? What can happen? The second plot line that I thought would be really interesting, you'd have to live in a cave to not realize that we are going through a presidential election. And I thought, oh my, the stress and the anger, that could be a great plot. And how would I do that? I hasten to add, for anybody who ends up treading into politics, I want to be apolitical, because I don't care who you're for, who you love, who you don't love, or whatever. I'd like you to enjoy my book. So you're not going to be able to tell who we're for or who we're against. So elections, and I think you by now realize that elections are coordinated at the state level. Each state puts together their own election program, and people have to recognize that these elections are fair and proper. Okay, here comes the what if. This is what I'm always thinking as a thriller writer. What if a third-party candidate could be kidnapping state officials and hacking into their system to, cook the books? And you have to think, well, how secure are these state systems? So that's the second plot line. The third plot line is another one of interest to me. 3 years ago, my wife and I moved into an over 55 community, and we have some of our friends who have been marching down the road long enough, so they're having some problems with memory. Or worse yet, we have friends whose spouses are having problems with memory and are in memory units. And I thought to myself, here, they're treated so well. It's wonderful. But here comes the what if. What if there's a memory unit that does not treat people well, takes advantage of them? But what could you do? How would that work? What should we do to make that believable? And the fourth plot line that I've been fascinated with, I've been hearing discussions and lectures and reading about artificial intelligence. And I thought, I wonder, how in the world could I use artificial intelligence in this book? Where do I even start with it? So I've got the four plot lines: the reunion, the presidential election, memory units, and artificial intelligence. Now let's see how we're going to tie all that together and make sense to the reader. And the way we start that is what I call a premise. A premise tells you what your story's about and what it means, rather than simply recounting what happens. So let's start with our reunion. We first start with what I call a status or status. This is, things are just going on. Things are pleasant and all this sort of stuff. This is before any change bomb hits. So usually when you open your book, things are just kind of going along, and it's going to hit somehow, but you've got to figure out how to do it and how to make it believable. So here we have Zach. He's living in Washington, D.C., works at the Pentagon and in the White House for the president's national security advisor, and he goes back to Minneapolis to his high school reunion. Oh, he's going to see old friends. He's got a girlfriend, Bonnie, that he hasn't seen for 20 years. What is she like? Will she remember him? What's she doing? And that is enough to bring on enough stress. And what I always do for my characters, I use a bio sheet, so I can understand my characters. And let's pause for a minute and talk about characters before we get started in the actual plot. Nobody's perfect. I know some people think they are, some people wish they were, but nobody's perfect. So you have to give some challenges to each one of your characters. For example, my hero, Zach Kelly, has had 3 tours, 2 in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq, for which he suffered some post-traumatic stress disorder. So periodically, Zach has some challenges with flashbacks. And as with everything else, they always come at a difficult time for him. The other one is that his wife he gets the divorce. His wife has depressed. She ends up starting to take drugs, starts to sell them, and she ends up in jail. So all of a sudden, Zach's 18-year-old daughter comes to live with him. You know, I don't know how many of you have had 18-year-old daughters. I've been blessed with 3. I love them dearly. They're wonderful, but they are challenges. So what happens now is Zach's used to being able to go out and save the world, work 12, 14 hours a day, but all of a sudden he's out trying to save the world and he gets a call. Dad, you promised be here for my soccer game. You're the assistant coach. Where are you? So this is something to kind of challenge Zach with his post-traumatic stress disorder and the fact now he has a daughter to care for. And we have physical challenges because what you have physically is basically what motivates you. And here's an example I always like to use. You've all heard of Barbara Streisand. She has a beautiful voice. I love her music. But let's suppose when she was born, she wasn't a singer. How would that have changed her life? So you need to think about your character. What physical and psychological and sociological traits do they have, and how do they motivate? So you can kind of show your partner and show your reader how they're going to react to things. Okay, let's take Zach to start at his high school reunion. Let me just read a short excerpt for you from my book, Missing. Calhoun Beach Hotel, Minneapolis, Friday, 4:06 p.m. On the drive-in from the airport, Zach had passed the house where he grew up. Then he went around his old high school. It was fun to see it. He figured he ought to check it out. But it looks the same, except it's much smaller than he remembers. And I guess that's pretty typical. When he reached 36th Street, he turned left and headed over to the lakes area. Minneapolis has beautiful lakes. He'd enjoyed all the lakes in Minneapolis, particularly Lake Harriet and Lake Calhoun. Maybe he decided to come back for the reunion because it would be held at the Calhoun Beach Hotel. He remembered parties, dances, proms with Bonnie, and he just swamped his memory. Soon after parking his rental car, he found himself on the patio in front of the hotel. Muscle memory must have led him there. A voice sounded behind him. Oh my goodness, Zach. Zach Kelly, is that you? Startled, Zach turned, saw a familiar face. It took a minute for him to come up with a name, and then he said, Jean. Jean Edwards, it is great to see you again. You look terrific. She smiled up at him. Sunglasses pushed back in her hair, long back hair framed her face, and she looked great in her sleeveless, cream-colored party dress, displaying her tan shoulders. Been a long time, Zach. Where have you been all these years? Well, let's see. After a year at the University of Minnesota, I had enough and I dropped out, and I've been in the Army pretty much since then. Married? You were a pretty eligible bachelor from what I remember. Actually, I got a divorce a year ago. How about you? I married Freddie Tyson. After college, I became Mrs. Tyson, although I never really did like to do the Mrs. bit. Wheeler dealer Freddie Tyson? I never thought that you two would connect. I didn't think so either, but it's worked. We've had a couple of kids and we're still hanging together. What's he doing these days? I always suspected he'd be very successful. Yep, he's done well. He owns a chain of nursing homes. The largest one is in South Minneapolis in Ridgefield, not quite out to Interstate 494. Seems like a good location, Zach said. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. Don't you work for some big deal weenie in DC? Zach had to laugh. I'm not sure Admiral Steele would like to be called a big deal weenie, but I guess he is. He's the president's national security advisor. Her eyes widened. Wow, what do you do? The admirals put together a small group to help him through the bureaucracy. A lot of crap going on in that DC. Jean stopped and looked out at the water for a minute. I guess that's what I'd like to talk to you about. Some problems I see in these nursing homes. Well, I suspect with Freddie, they're hugely successful. She kept looking at the table, then back at Zach. They are, but Zach heard a muffled pop, knew the sound, shouted, gun, and turned to pull Jean to the ground. He hit the ground and covered Jean with his body, then raised his head to look around. A few startled people looked at him. Get down, a gun. They all hit the ground. A quick look at Jean told him all he needed to know. She had taken what he thought was a high velocity round right in the forehead, had died instantly. But he checked for a pulse to make sure. None. Damn. He grabbed his cell and dialed 911. Now, the next thing that you want to do, once you start with an inciting incident, if you look at the premise, you need to start building pressure and response. Pressure and response. So you continue to add pressure on your hero. So let's move on a little bit, and we find that Zach is being interviewed by the police. It took about 10 minutes after Zach had first called 911 for a platoon of blue to land. They began to spread yellow crime scene tape around the scene. An ambulance pulled up, sirens screaming. The orderly dashed over to where Jean lay, bent down, checked for a pulse, shook his head, looked at Zach. He still had the shakes. The orderly covered the body. He thought about her. Why her? What had she done? Dated her a few times. Just a good friend. His trip down memory lane was broken up by a tall man in a brown suit and a brown sport coat and tan slacks, opening the door and striding into the office. He pulled out a badge and showed it to Zach. I'm Lieutenant Barrington with the Minneapolis Police Department. I understand you were talking to the victim when she was shot. Is that right? Is it all right if I tape our conversation? Zach nodded, sure. Okay, Barrington, first of all, who are you and why are you here? Zach pulled out his billfold and showed the lieutenant his military ID. I grew up in Minneapolis and I went to Washburn High School. It's been 20 years since I graduated. Then I started the University of Minnesota. Things didn't work out there, so I joined the Army and I really haven't looked back since. The door burst open and a heavy-set man in a gray suit, tie undone, burst into the room. What happened? Someone told me my wife was standing in the patio talking to a guy and someone shot her. Barrington held out his hand. Please, wait a minute. Are you Mr. Tyson? Yeah, I am. What happened? He ran his fingers through his curly brown hair, turned his eye, and his eyes widened in recognition. Kelly. Zach Kelly? Zach stood and reached over to shake hands. That's right. I'm so sorry about Jean. We were standing there talking and someone shot her. I couldn't believe it. She was such a good friend of mine. Tyson started to pace. Who would shoot Jean? She didn't have an enemy in the world. Then he slowed and he looked at Zach. Wait a minute. Aren't you in the Army? Work for some big deal dude in Washington? You're the reason, he shouted. You're the reason she's dead, because some guy was trying to kill you and missed. Tyson moved toward Zach, swinging his fist. Zach stepped back and raised his hand to protect himself. What's with Tyson? Holy crap, he thinks it's about me. Will others think the same thing? Okay, so what we've done now is we realize that Jean was shot, she died, and her husband is accusing Zach of being the reason that Jean got shot. So what we've done is kind of opened, and we've tried to increase the stress on Zach, because readers are going to you want your readers to stay. Okay, let's look now, plot line 2. You remember that that's the presidential election. Somebody is trying to steal the election. So let's think about that. And how are we going to introduce that subject? Right now, we're going to skip to Fairfax, Virginia, where someone has just broken into the home of a man working on a secret document to help protect the election, and they killed a security guard. Fairfax County Homicide Lieutenant Scott is investigating, trying to figure out what happened. Now, Scott will be a new character to many of you who have not had a chance to read my series, but she is a longtime friend of Zach Kelly's and has worked with him on a number of different problems. She's a homicide detective in Fairfax County. She's a tall woman, almost 6 feet, 170 pounds, got dark hair. She wears wide reading glasses. And she's a large woman and a tough cop, very demanding. Now, let me introduce her and read just a short excerpt that's going to kind of help you understand plot line 2. Fairfax County, Virginia, Saturday, 2:00 a.m. Homicide Detective Pamela Scott stood in the hallway outside the second floor room, staring at the body of an elderly black man lying on the floor. Damn, she thought, looks like the job of a pro. Shot through the chest, then twice in the head to seal the deal. She didn't like the idea of a pro on her watch. Scott heard a man shouting in the downstairs hallway. "This is my house. I demand to be able to go into my study." A calm voice replied, "Well, just a minute, sir. Please let me check with my lieutenant." Scott called to the police officer. "It's all right. Let him go up. Let him come upstairs." So a slender man who looked to be in his mid-50s burst upstairs. "Who are you? This is my house. I demand to know what's going on." Scott had dealt with firecrackers like this guy before. She pulled out her badge and showed it to the man. "I'm Lieutenant Scott with the Fairfax County Police Department. I'm investigating the murder of a security guard. Now, suppose you calm down until I figure out just who you are. This is my crime scene. I won't have you turn it into a circus. Okay, what's your name?" The man stepped back. "I'm Professor Underwood. Who are you?" Again. "I'm Homicide Lieutenant Scott with Fairfax County Police Department. I was called here to investigate the murder of a security guard." She nodded toward the body with a sheet over it. "Our medical examiner will be here in a minute." Underwood looked like he might faint. What? Why? Scott figured this was her due to step in and get this mess under control. She got her tablet out. Full name, Jeremy Underwood. Scott made a note. "I understand you're researching a system to improve the security for our elections." "That's right, Lieutenant. You say someone shot our guard? Why?" "I don't know, but I'll find out." "Where were you this evening?" "Okay, my wife and I were out visiting friends. We arrived home to see the police cars outside." "Do you have any idea who might have done such a thing?" Underwood stared off for a moment. No, not that I know of." "So you and your team had finished your study. Successful?" "That's right. We received a contract from the Department of State. Because of the sensitivity of the subject, we had to classify the results to protect the contents." "Had you received any threats concerning the study?" Any reason to believe someone might try to steal it? No, but we felt it necessary to keep the content safe. That's why we have a security detachment in our house. He knelt down, clutching his stomach. Oh God, this is awful. I'll need the names of people you say you visited this evening, Scott said. Of course, Lieutenant. I'll get that information to you right away. Do you know who might have wanted to steal this study? Underwood shook his head. As you probably know, our country felt a high level of concern about a foreign country getting involved in our elections. We had to prevent this, and that's the purpose of the study. Could it have been a foreign power responsible for this action? I have no reason to suspect any particular government might have been involved. I'm sure you realize the current election process is already pretty heated. You had to be blind not to see that. Underwood got the hint of a smile. So true. Okay, so what we have now is we've introduced the second plot line. There's security for the election system. And the reader's beginning to wonder, okay, wait a minute, this opened up in Minneapolis. Now we've moved to Fairfax County, Virginia. Now we're going to talk more and introduce the third party candidate who's going to be running for president. Now, the third member of SAC's team is Lieutenant Colonel Renee Garcia. She's a military police officer. She's a small woman, but she's tough. She had originally, her father had wanted her to stay and become a social work teacher like he was, but she really wanted to be in the Army. And because of her size, she took a lot of karate, and she's got her black belt in karate. And of course, one of her guilts is she has a real fear that she's disappointed her dad. So let's read a little bit about and find out a little bit more about what's going on here in the election. Washington, D.C., the Convention Center, Saturday, 7:30 p.m. Renee Garcia stood in the back of the mammoth D.C. Convention Center, listening to General Frederick Farmington rattle off his litany of slights the Americans have taken from everyone in the world without standing up to him. Farmington had been chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff until a little over 18 months ago. He'd become disgruntled with what he saw as the president's willingness to put up with smaller countries pushing us around. He became more and more vocal with his concerns. The president warned him to stop. He chose not to and made a very public retirement speech in protest. This led to the formation of the Patriot Party. No one took them seriously until about 8 months ago when Farmington announced his plan to run for president. And over the past couple of months, he's been holding rallies around the country. His efforts have been gaining traction, as shown by his poll numbers. With only 2 months until the election, he appeared to be a serious threat to the president. When Admiral Steele had asked Garcia to go undercover and watch Farmington, she had scanned his FBI file. A graduate of West Point and every other military school under the sun, as well as several seminars at Harvard and Yale, he had an enviable file. His father had been a major general and a hero at the Battle of the Bulge, and his grandfather had ridden with Teddy Roosevelt. So he was Mr. Military all the way around. As she turned around to walk her way out, she felt a hand on her elbow. She didn't like it and was about to elbow whoever it was in the gut and jam her heel into his foot when a voice said, "Don't do it. I can't afford the doctor. I know your black belt." She knew the voice and she settled back. "Don't worry, you're safe this time." Sonny Benton, Farmington's chief of staff, a big-bellied, big-mouthed politico who had worked his way up through the campaigns to run this big one for Farmington. The two had started the Patriot Party. Normally, third parties had trouble gaining traction, but the way the Patriots had caught hold worried the admiral and explained why she now stood there watching. Garcia glared up at him. Benson, you gotta quit grabbing women. Someday somebody's gonna punch you in the nose. That's what I love about you, Garcia. You've got such a gift of gab. How do you like our event? Garcia seemed to think for a minute, holding her finger to her chin. I'm really sorry you don't have very many people here. I bet you're really disappointed. Benson laughed. We're blowing the roof off this place. That's why the hotshot president is so worried, and he should be, frankly. You scare him. You know, I try to stay as far away as I can from all the political stuff. We're on our way, and I've got a special place for you, Garcia, on the campaign. He smiled his big grin. Special assistant to the chief of staff, with all the perks that go with it. Sounds good, although I'm a little worried about what some of those perks might be. He leaned in close. You got it. Then he backed away. Just kidding. I don't want one of your karate chops on my neck. Now, I gotta get back to work. But you think about my offer. I'll move you up to my assistant. I'd like to have you involved. Okay, so now we've introduced Renee Garcia, who is a member of our series team. You know, Zach is a series character, and so is Renee Garcia. But we know now that there's something going on at the reunion. We know now a little bit about the election. What about plotline 3, the memory unit? How will all that fit in? And really, what if memory unit patients are mistreated? And why would they be? Well, you may remember that we talked about Bonnie Svensson. Bonnie was Zach's girlfriend, and he met her, and it turns out that her mother is a patient in the memory unit that's owned by Freddie, who is the husband of the woman who was killed by the sniper. And she's in a nursing home. So Bonnie takes Zach and invites him to come in to see the nursing home. And Zach jumps at the chance because he wants to try to figure out what in the world's going on. He's heard there's some problems with this place, but he needs to find out what. So Bonnie pulled up in front of the Shady Lane Nursing Center and parked in the visitor's lot, turned off the motor on her Honda. Zach got out and looked around. The center, a small one-story brick building, took up about a half a block and stood right on the corner. Following her up the stairs, he couldn't help but be curious about Freddie's business and figured this would be a great way to check it out. He pushed open the door and followed Bonnie inside. Bonnie greeted the receptionist and signed up at the front desk. I'm here to see my mother. Receptionist pointed down the hall. You know the way. As they walked, Zach looked around. It's a big place. Their staff for about 150 beds, 30 of which belong to the memory unit, said Bonnie. For patients with Alzheimer's? Well, actually, in my research, she said, I found there are many kinds of dementia. Alzheimer's is only one. My mom is in the early stages of a dementia. She seems to be getting worse. She almost started to cry. She seems to be getting worse each time I see her. I don't think there's a memory care unit here. I don't think she's ready for the memory care unit. The assisted living section makes sure she takes her medicine and helps her with dressing and other things. What's the memory care unit like? To be honest, I'm not sure, Zach. I've never been in the unit. The staff doesn't want to bother the patients. That answer has never made sense to me. What happens if you transfer your mom into the unit? Well, then I'm going to check it out. Her comment really piqued Zach's interest. I wonder why they don't allow people into the unit. You'd think patients would enjoy seeing other people. If they try to pull any of that crap on my mom, Bonnie said, I'll yank her out of this center. Who in the world would want to be all alone? And that's a good question. That's something to think about. Why won't they allow anybody into the memory unit? So we're starting to fold together our three plot lines. One plot line is the reunion. We found out what happened. We've got a what if there. Second plot line is the election. The third plot line is a memory care unit and what are people doing. Now, we've introduced 3 different plot lines and 3 different places. So maybe it's time to just allow our reader to take a deep breath and kind of think about everything. And I think what we want to do is to make sure that our readers realize that these characters are real people. They're not just running around trying to save the world. They have lives, they have friends. So what we're trying to do here is to slow the reader down a little bit and kind of summarize so that they can now move forward. So let's go to Washington, D.C., Monday, 8:00 a.m. Garcia got off her motorcycle and locked it. She walked up toward Mom's restaurant to meet with Scott, an older one-story plywood building whose white paint siding looked as if it could use a few more coats of paint. But the owner did serve wonderful breakfast. She wasn't sure why Scott wanted to meet her, but no doubt it was important. Scott had said it was important, so it was important. When she pushed the door open, the sliding glass door, and stepped inside, she heard a mix of voices and the thumping of country music. Thankfully, not too loud. She spotted Scott and walked over. Hey, Scotty, how are you doing? I'm doing great, although I've gotten into a case that's really bothering me, and I thought you might be interested. So sit down and grab some coffee. I've got a menu in case you're hungry. By the way, how's Harold doing? Garcia sat at the red plastic covered table and picked up the menu. Oh, he's the same old Harold. Kind of a pain in the ass cat, but I love him dearly. She scanned the menu. Coffee and eggs sounds perfect. Never turn eggs down. The waitress walked over and poured Garcia coffee, took her order, then refilled Scott's mug. When the waitress left, Garcia said, okay, what's up, Scott? Scott played with her coffee cup and whispered, let me summarize things for you. And I'm not sure how big a deal this is, so let's whisper. Okay, Garcia took a sip of coffee. Okay. I guess you'd have to be on another planet, Scott said, to not realize the concerns about other governments hacking into our elections. Let me give you a short burst. What's bothering me? I suspect you'll pick up on it. Another sip of coffee. Absolutely, go ahead. I got called to a crime scene early this Saturday morning. It seemed someone murdered a security guard at a professor's house on George Mason University campus. Looked like a professional job. 1 shot in the chest and 2 in the head to seal the deal. Okay, what else? The safe had been opened, and I understand some highly classified material stolen. This hotshot prof had some super deal study to protect our elections. The waitress arrived with their food. They leaned back and waited until she served them and refilled the all-important coffee cups. After they'd taken a couple of bites of breakfast, Scott continued. I have to ask, why does a professor at one of our local universities have a full security contingent? Better yet, why does he live in a big, beautiful home? Good point, Garcia said. Now, how did the killer get in? Apparently, he had a key to the kitchen door. Garcia took another bite of egg and chewed. Did the prof know how that thief happened to get a key to the door? And it sounds like codes to a safe. Scott shook her head. How did the thief know the timing of the security schedule? Sounds like an inside job to me. The waitress returned to their table, topped off their coffees. Can I bring you anything else? Just the bill, Scott replied. I'll take it. Garcia nodded her thanks. All these questions came to me, and I figured I'd better contact my favorite military cop for an opinion. The whole thing doesn't make any sense. Besides, I hoped you had some idea about all this political crap. Well, Garcia said, the Admiral has asked me to follow this Farmington guy and attend his rally. His concerns radiate around Farmington's belief that the U.S. should unleash the military. Farmington's emphasis is there are too many tin-horn dictators kicking us around, and that's why we're following his campaign. Scott took another cup of coffee, another swig of coffee. Completely agree with you. By the way, what's going on with Fairchild? Fairchild is another member of the team. She's on her way to Minneapolis, Garcia said. What's she doing there? Doesn't she realize in a few months she'll be freezing to death in that Arctic climate? Well, Zach's case is interesting. Garcia shared what she knew about his reunion and the shooting. Holy crap. Hell of a way to start a reunion. No kidding. Now, when I get back to the office, I'll share what you told me with Admiral Steele and give Fairchild a call, and I'll let you know what I find out. So what we've tried to do is slow down there and let the reader kind of take a deep breath and begin to tie together some of what's going on. Now you're about to say, okay, what happened to artificial intelligence? I thought you said that was a plot line. Well, that's something I've been really interested in, and I'm going to include it. And let me just tell you a little bit about why I think it's important. You know, artificial intelligence is made up of these machine learning logarithms. Machines given basic information, and then through a series of trial and errors, it can kind of come up with a decision. It's far faster than humans and probably makes fewer errors. The exciting part may be the dangerous part. Computer may discover rules and correlations the programmer doesn't even know or think about. I think the easiest way to understand it is artificial intelligence can be compared to teaching a child rather than programming a computer. You need to be careful the child doesn't use the information against you. Now, a lot of people may be overreacting because, you know, we've been using artificial intelligence, my goodness, since 1914. You know, it's estimated that the commercial pilot only is in charge of that flight for like 7 minutes, and that's the takeoff and landing. And the automatic pilot does the rest. And so what if, here's my what if, someone hacks into the computers using artificial intelligence to gain an election benefit? Could it work? Certainly. Possible. How would somebody do it? Now, I can't tell you everything because you'll have to find out and read the book. So what I'm going to do is to stop there now and just kind of summarize. We've got these various plot lines. We've got Zach and his team immersed in a concern through reunion and the election and the possibility of problems with the memory unit and artificial intelligence. And I hope that I've kind of stirred your interest. And I'd like to mention to you that Missing is available. You can get a signed book of Missing. Just contact my publisher at headlinebooks.com, and she would be more than happy to send a signed copy to you. Okay, Ashley, I thank you very much for your time. And I think it's time to open it up to questions if there are any.
Hi, Don.
Okay.
This book is so good and it's so timely, particularly with all the chaos that's going on right now with our current election.
Yes, talk about stress. Yeah, absolutely.
I know, and artificial intelligence is a subject that we could talk about for hours. And I just want to encourage people to pick up this book. It's such a good read. And the whole Zach Kelly series is available on headlinebooks.com. And Don, we've had a question about book clubs. I don't know, we do offer a discount for book clubs and groups, but we also do virtual author visits. Have you done any of those lately?
I haven't done them virtually, but I have done a number of book clubs, and they're a lot of fun. I know each year when I was back in Perry County, we would go up and there was like 16 people in a book club, and they all were enjoying the stories. Now, I know my wife is on virtual Zooms on 2 book clubs, one from her friends in Perry County and one here. And I think there's a possibility that I might be involved. So I would be more than happy to Zoom with anybody that might be interested. I think it would be a lot of fun, and it's a good way to meet people and make contacts.
It is. And can you tell people, do you have a new book coming out? What are you working on now?
Oh, I'm very excited about what we're doing now. When we started with the pandemic, we started doing workshops, and we began doing workshops on writing memoirs. And so many people were interested. I mean, I really enjoy a memoir. You know, we all remember what we were doing during 9/11, or when the President Kennedy was shot. And so just think of what's going on now, and you'll be interested in looking back, and writing a memoir is a great way to do that. And we've just released within the last month, Voices from the Pandemic. And it's a terrific memoir about, I've just got the missing here right now, but it's a terrific memoir. And I think the exciting part about it is we've got so many different voices. We've got healthcare voices, we've got musicians and artists who no longer have audiences. And also the fun part, we have 8 students, 6th graders, who just think of what the impact is on them and what the future means. And we've kind of tried to pick up their thoughts on it. So Voices of the Pandemic has been released, and it's very popular. And who knows, we may even do another anthology maybe sometime next year.
I think that would be great. And we also will have coming up in 2021, we'd like to have Don back for a workshop on how to mix 2 or 3 plots when you're writing fiction. And Don also has a terrific workshop on writing creative nonfiction, which he did before we published Voices from the Pandemic. And I think that the memoirs that we did get, like Don said, do read like fiction. I mean, everybody's lives have been turned upside down.
Absolutely, including us.
That's right. We will have another installment of Voices from the Pandemic coming up in January. If you check our zoomintobooks.com, you can see the schedule there. It's also posted at headlinebooks.com. And we don't have any more questions. Don, I want to thank you so much for coming on to Zoom into Books today. And I hope that you and your family and everyone listening has a Merry Christmas.
Yes, I share those wishes for a happy and safe holiday. And I look forward to a new 2021 when we're able to kind of go back and start meeting with people again. Won't that be fun?
Yes, it will. It certainly will. So
Well,
thank
you,
you.
Kathy. I appreciate your hosting.
Sure thing. And thank you everyone on Facebook for joining us.